Welcome to SOEM. I'm your host, Karema Fakara. Today we have AJ. Good to have you on the show.
Cool, pleasure being here.
Welcome to SOEM Talk. I met you last week at the UK Freedom March, Hyde Park, London, UK anti-lockdown protest.
Did.
And you had a lot of interesting things to say. And
depending on who I'm talking to.
right, okay. And I'd like to get a bit of your backstory coming into how we met at that protest. What brought you to that protest. So I want to just start there. Just kind of a quick summary as to why you came, why you thought it was important to come to that protest on Saturday.
Well, before anything else, I came as an individual just because I agreed with how it was published or promoted as to being anti-lockdown, anti-vaccinations. That's my first, or that's what was my initial reason for being there. Secondary, I've always been for the people. I've always been against systems of oppression, and no matter what, whether I'm personally involved or feel involved or not, I'll always be there if I can or if I'm able to stand and either fight or protest with those people fighting or protest against the very same common enemy that mankind has.
Just before we get into further reasons, I just wanted to, I know you've already told me that you don't like to be categorized or boxed in, but just talking about some of the work that you do, who you are. I know that you've been a professional boxer, that you're a personal trainer, that you got into different forms of art, music. Anything else that you want to share?
In terms of relating to what you said about being boxed in, I think that the way things are, the way society is, the way this world is, it tries to make people categorize themselves, or tries to categorize people and put people into a particular box, saying that they have to fit a particular box or mold, when the majority of people are not just one type of way. And it's very normal for there to be an uprise or spike in the numbers of mental health, especially nowadays, when people are trying to live in a system or in a society that is telling them, no, you have to be this, and if you are this, you cannot be that. That's people going against their nature, it's going against their logic, it's going against their intelligence, which naturally what then happens is they'll implode way before they explode. And their implosions going on all the time, happening all the time, which comes again in the form of mental health, comes in the form of people behaving erratically, people becoming addicted to substances, whether that be drugs, whether that be alcohol, whether that be gambling, becoming addicted to addictive behaviour.
And you think a lot of that is linked to people, the pressures of trying to fit into like a social box?
Yeah, the pressures of, I would call it the insanity of normality. Because what society is saying that people are allowed to say is normal, not necessarily normal, in my opinion, but also in the fact of life. Like the sky is blue, that's normal. Because we've all agreed on the construct that the colour blue is the colour blue. But separately to that, that's a very normal thing. Spider crawls, that's normal.
So you're saying like by putting this kind of identity, or like making like a determinative statement about someone, it's almost like we're putting a limit on them.
You're making people self-limit themselves, and that's never going to end well. Like I said, it's going against people's nature, it's going against their intelligence of what they want to do, and that inevitably implodes. It's like when you have let's say you turn on the tap, if you was to block the faucet or the exit of the tap where the water comes out, the water has to go somewhere. So it's going to go back up into the pipes, and at some point it's going to burst somewhere in the pipe, because that pressure, that flow of life has to come out in one way or another, in one form or another. Now it's either allowed to come out naturally through the faucet, or if not, if the faucet is blocked up, then it's going to be forced out in another way. Hence mental health, hence drug addiction, hence alcohol addiction, hence abusive self-behavior from people.
So let's talk about that quickly then, because the society we live in, especially like in this setting where we're doing an interview, right, and the things we're going to be talking about, there's many people that will want to know, who is this person that's qualified to talk about these things? Like, what is it that they do? What work do they do? What experiences they have? They want to be able to understand people by those kind of terms, by the job that they do, the work they do, the career.
By putting myself into a box,
right?
Which I get, I totally get, and I respect, and I encourage people to do that. If anyone they're listening to, hearing from, or talking to, put people in a question. Why are you saying this? What gives you the right to say this? Keep asking questions. That's the only way you get to learn. You get knowledge. You gain knowledge from asking questions.
But do you think there's like a real emphasis on the title someone has rather than the content of what they're actually saying?
I do think there's a lot more emphasis on this person, case in point, is a politician. So therefore his title alone means that he knows, or whatever he's talking about, that he says is better for us. You don't know what's better for you, someone else knows what's better for you, because they're qualified, because they fit in that political, or I call them politricks, because that's what all politics is, just wordplay and a game with words and how they make people think or how they make people feel. The same way, if you want to talk about a very unpopular character by the name of Bill Gates, he doesn't have any physician's license. He hasn't taken any studies or tests to do with drugs, pharmaceuticals. Yet he is leading in world vaccine. No one questions that though, because he's a genius with computers. Remember, so. But, it's, again, I think that stigmatizing or putting someone in a box also goes down to suit people's agendas, and also tends to happen when people face with cognitive dissonance, which is going against what they believe to be true or what they know to be true, which is very hard for some people to accept. It's hard to accept in general. I myself have had that, but whether you accept it or not, it's happening. The same way, like, simply put, if you're in the house and it's raining outside, for as upset as you can be or get because it's raining, you have to accept that it's raining. There's nothing that you can do or say about it. That's the flow of nature. That's what's happening. That's life. That's the reality.
Okay, so going back to the protest.
Sorry to cut you there.
Yeah.
In terms of bring out myself, in terms of what you're saying about people saying, they may want to know why I can say this, why I can say that. First of all, I'm giving you my opinion or my belief of how things are. It's through the life that I've led, just through the experiences that I've had. But there's also a lot of fact that I'm talking based on the books that I've read, the information that I've gathered. A lot of that has stemmed from suffering a brain injury, having to look a lot on how the brain works. This is my own brain, how the functions of brains plurally work, how they generally work, how the conscious works, how the subconscious works, how the long-term memory works, how the short-term memory works, and how the working memory works. So I have a comprehension and an understanding and a knowledge and insight into the mechanics of the brain.
Can talk to me a little bit about that, the brain injury that you suffered. I don't know, I've never suffered a brain injury. So, to what extent did it affect your life at the time?
Looking back, not so much in terms of my memory, I recall a few things, but more so from what friends and loved ones have said or told myself. My behaviour was very erratic. I had bleeds in my brain. I was suffering from depression at the time. I then got misdiagnosed and told that I had a brain aneurysm and that it was quite serious. Matter of fact, I didn't get told. My mother got told because I missed my appointment and my mother went to it. And I know from asking several doctors that the patient-doctor confidentiality can only be broken in terms of life or death, or life-threatening injuries. And therefore, based on with my depression, based on what other people who I then told about it had said to myself, I sunk low into it. But I'm thankful because I got to learn so much as well. You need to lose yourself to find yourself, I believe.
And how long did it? So first of all, this was a boxing injury.
Yeah. So my last 2 fights, I suffered a concussion from both of them, but obviously the impact of the concussions obviously impacted upon my brain as well. So.
And how long was it before you knew that? Was it instantly that you?
No, I went undiagnosed for pretty much a year.
Wow.
So a lot of my friends, some of my family were saying that we saw you acting a bit weird, but we didn't really say anything because we kind of thought that you were having like a hard time with what was happening and whatnot, which I got and I respect.
Yeah.
But I was acting weird just from some of the memories that I had, from some of the things that I was doing.
So they might have been thinking like you lost this big fight, right? The last one you had.
I was acting weird. If I recall my behaviour, I was mimicking the environment that I was around as well, the people that I was around. I was also, which was crazy, I was acting in a particular way as to how I was acting like 10, 15 years earlier, which is very weird. Almost like repeating some mistakes or some lifestyle choices. It was very bizarre to say the least, because it's bizarre to look back at because I wasn't aware that I was doing it at the time, but recalling it thinking, oh, that's just weird. But that's the beauty of life. And that's the complexity of people's brains, and my brain in this case.
Was there any like physical pain or?
No, none whatsoever.
None?
No. I had headaches. The severity of my headaches would vary, but some of them were quite bad. I ended up starting to smoke weed and drinking codeine to help my sleep because I was unable to sleep.
Had you ever had trouble sleeping before?
No, never before. But again, my recollection is, I'm just telling you this, but I don't feel like I was in much pain. The headaches were rather bothersome and painful, but I don't feel like I was in pain. It's a weird kind of paradigm. That's it.
And so, because you told me before that it was after that injury that you started kind of looking at things a bit differently.
Yeah.
Like, what things in particular, what did you start doing? Obviously, like, that was a big injury after your last fight, and you didn't go back into training, obviously, or? No.
Well, I did like temporarily, but then, like I said, life just kind of spiraled completely out of control. In terms of what you're asking about, getting into things, just one day I was making a joke with a friend of mine, just talking about birds. Just randomly talking about birds, and then boom, like words just kept on coming into my head, to where I was, at the times I was sleeping, I was getting up in the middle of the night and writing things down. And kind of like went on to kind of express myself through poetry. I got heavily into words, which to a degree was weird because I had this reoccurring memory of when I was like, I think 9 or 10 years old, with my great uncle, he was Italian. He was good to talk Italian, but he was in the Nazi concentration camp like 3 years, escaped from there, but based on being in there, he could speak German fluently, could speak French fluently, he was able to speak Dutch and I think 2 or 3 other languages. And I remember when I was younger, always asking him, why don't you learn English? And he was just, no, it's a switch, like crazy. No, English is a bastard language. And he always used to say that, but I never ever got kind of what he meant until this brain injury that I was going through. And then randomly, I don't even know why, I think I was just trying to discover the meaning of a word. And then from there I just started reading the dictionary. Like, literally, I'll show you next time I see you. My dictionary just got like loads of little bookmarks here and there, and loads of little words, little papers with words and meanings, and a lot. From what I saw, a lot of the words in the English dictionary, their origin is either from Latin, from Greek, or from French, or the words themselves. Like one word will be made up of 2 different words. So like for instance, understand, which when people believe to mean comprehend. But then there's a language which is called legalese, which they use in the courts, which police use, which doctors use, which the term understanding is synonymous, or do you understand what I'm saying? You say yes. In legalese, that's a verbal contract. As understand is synonymous with stand under, which is the 2 words. Understand, you're standing under what I'm saying. So when police say to you, do you understand what I'm saying? And you say yes, you've entered a verbal contract with them straight away. And there's a lot of deceptive programming that we've had to be susceptible to from pretty much our birth. Anyone who's in England or America or any European country I know would have been programmed with this, but in most countries we're attacked from young, and that's like the frightening thing that I ended up finding out about words and looking more into words and wording and this and that.
So was it like one thing that you came across that kind of led you on a journey of like, wanting to know more?
Yeah, it's literally like a domino effect. Just stemming from having a conversation about birds.
Right. Okay. What was that conversation?
It's about saying about how free birds were.
Right, okay.
I'm saying like, if a bird, you want to feed it, a bird may come for food because it's hungry, but generally a bird can just fly off and just go where it wants.
Yeah.
And it's about having that kind of freedom, which people have the perception of being free, but when you go looking into society and people's lives, like they're not really free. Worse off, most people aren't free from themselves, let alone external reasons, which that's a rather daunting fact. But it's life, or the famous term that has now come up is "it is what it is."
So was there like new work that you started to do after you got this brain injury, after that last fight? Is there kind of new things that you started to actively do, as well as like your outlook and like what you were studying? Did it lead to like?
Yeah, I mean, I told you earlier, my main work, which I heavily involve myself in now, is looking after my physical health and looking after my mental health, because I'm the only one that has to live with them, like a long term, from now until whenever I pass through into another plane.
Sorry, because you mentioned that with your brain injury you started looking into how the brain works.
Yeah.
Right. Did you do that? What reason did you do that? I know that might sound like an obvious question, right? But was there anything within the medical system that you felt like you needed to know yourself, like, because did you feel any kind of like distrust towards what was going on?
I've always had distrust, from as long as I can remember, with the system in place. My hunger for searching that information was just to be able to comprehend, to understand, and to understand how my brain works, and then how my brain works, what I may be susceptible taking in, whether it's consciously or subconsciously. I just wanted to have to be informed about that. But then looking at my own brain, then there's a lot of information that you're able to kind of impart and use on the generalizations of brains. This is how brains work.
Yeah.
Like, for instance, programming. through television. It's in every single home, and sometimes there's like 4 or 5 in one home. And if you don't believe that, you know, the television, which ironically the name of it, television, is telling lies to your vision. It says it. Television programs, telling lies to your vision, programming. If you don't believe that there's nothing wrong with it, then each to their own. But I can guarantee you that there is definitely something wrong with it. I mean, not so much the television itself, but what the media companies are putting out on those televisions.
I mean, it's interesting to me that, you know, the words that they were chosen for this, like program, right? Like now, because the word program has been used with like a show for so long, people may not see it.
It's normalized.
It's normalized.
The insanity of normality
of it being used. But if you look at what the word programming means, and that word has been taken for this. I think the origins are important, right?
I think the origins of all the words that we use are important. First of all, for our own self-respect. That's what I was looking into words for how I speak, for how I present myself. But also as to what I'm saying. Am I saying something that I don't know the meaning to? Like there's a few words, I can't think off the top of my head of one, but there's a few words that people know how to use it, but they don't actually know. They don't know the meaning. So I'll give you an example. I like to use mankind.
Okay. Yeah.
Just because two are like man, representing everyone, and kindness, can't go wrong. Now I looked into the word human and break that down. The word H-U-E, hue means colour, and the word man means either a man as in a physical being or a servant. So my comprehension of that was, okay, depending on your colour, depends on whether you are a man or a servant. And if you look at how things are in the system, it tends to coincidentally be that most people of colour are in some form of servitude, and definitely some form of oppression. Now, say coincidentally like that because I'm very aware that there is no such thing as coincidence, just the illusion of it. My belief is that everything is energy and timing. So when you start not accepting things for being the coincidences that they appear, and you actually look at the reasons behind something having happened, you start to see how deep the rabbit hole is. And it's surprisingly not surprisingly deep.
That's interesting. Like I remember my one of my spiritual teachers, he said to me, when we're talking about the term people of color, he said to me, is there a person that you can think of in the world that doesn't have a color? But like, so when we look at where that term come from, like who's calling themselves people of color, where does that come from? And so even like with hue, like when we think of color, automatically when we're talking about people, we start thinking about anyone who's of a darker shade of what we're calling white people, right? But the reality is there's no one white, right? And there's no one even black. The words that we're choosing to identify with skin color. Why do you think, like, do you have any thoughts on that labeling of color?
I mean, I feel that the generalization for the people in society is just very naturally just describing what they see. The term black or white, I do find that very vague because they're the only two that are not colours, they're tones. When you go looking deeper into that rabbit hole, you kind of find out, which is weird, that how would I describe that? Basically, black is white and white is black, because your impression of seeing the two is that you can get any colour from white, but you can't. You can turn black into any colour, but you can't turn white into it. It's just a lot of craziness, and these are just subconscious and subliminal things that I believe that the people in control of societies have put into play with the wording that we tend to use.
Okay. Just on the brain injury, was there anything that you found out in your research that helped you to recover yourself?
The power that I have over my own brain. People tend to just, think it's an organ there. Like you can literally, your brain is a receiver. As much as it's receiving, it also gives out signals. So you can choose to give out whatever you want. You can change it as long as you internalize it and you change it for real. You can tell yourself anything, and you can make that happen, and you can make it work. Whether again, with the energy and timing, it may not necessarily happen there and then, but it will at some point materialize. That's my belief, and my belief stems from my experiences.
If you didn't know that, what effect do you think that would have?
I don't feel that I would be as concise with what I do, as concise with what I say, as what's the word I'm looking for? I'm not gonna say authoritative, but as just on it,
Right.
as I am, or as I feel that I am.
Yeah.
Sharp with things, because I'm onto anything that you hear, see, smell, touch. It all plays a part in who you are.
So would you say your sharpness has improved after your boxing injury?
I would say that, yeah.
Yeah. That's funny.
More so, it's very ironic because you'd think it the opposite, but I would say how I would describe it is like a domino effect. There was the injury, but then it went on to knock onto things that helped. Some of that was through learning about my injury. It's not the injury itself.
Yeah.
It's having that time or that opportunity to look at how brains work. So, like I said, I'm thankful for it. I'm cool.
You feel like that happened for a reason?
Everything does happen for a reason, whether we are aware of it or not, whether we know the reason or not.
Yeah.
In timing, you tend to find out the reason, which everyone has experienced. That you're going through things and something happens, you're like, do you know what? Then it helps you to understand what happened, like 5 days ago or 2 years ago or something. Everyone's had that form of experience where they have something happen, and I get what so-and-so said then, or I get why that happened, or I get what I should have learned from that, blah, blah, blah. That's cool. That's why everything happens for a reason.
Okay. I just before we move on to the more of the talk about the protests and what's going on right now with the lockdown situation of coronavirus, I just wanted to get a little bit of your backstory. So you mentioned that you're a professional boxer. How did you get into professional boxing?
There was a period. My father was a boxer before anything else. He was a professional boxer.
Okay.
So I was always forced into the gyms, even though I hated it when I was younger. Like days of school in the gym, I was sick from school in the gym just constantly. More so, I was bullied when I was younger, and then eventually I started fighting back because I had to, but then I started enjoying it. I just thought, why not? I knew that in life, it's not what you know, it's who you know. And my dad had contacts in boxing, so I thought, why not get involved in that?
So was it the bullying that gave you like the taste for it, or like?
No.
Okay.
Cut you. The bullying gave me the taste of fighting.
Right.
I wouldn't say, but because when that happened, boxing was not on my mind at all.
Right.
And I think at least like 8 years or so, maybe 10 years after. No, about 8 years, 7, 8 years after the bullying stopped, that I got into boxing. So it was nowhere near on my mind. It just happened.
What do you think is the best way to deal with bullying?
First verbally. Then I do feel that everyone should learn a form of self-defense to defend themselves. They may not necessarily have to be being bullied to defend themselves. They may need to defend themselves against someone who's crazy. You find that normally, if you know how to defend yourself, if an animal tries to attack you, you have some form of instinct to fight back.
But I mean, as someone who's been bullied in your life, why do you think people get bullied?
I think people doing the bullying, I just believe that they have very cowardly natures.
Do you think you've ever been a bully to someone?
I've never gone out of my way to bullying because I experienced that.
Right.
I can see with things that I've done how that can be translated. That maybe I have been, but I've never put my hands on anyone who didn't have a reason to be hurt as far as I was concerned. But like I said, more specifically for the trauma that I had gone through. And I remember, funny enough, when I was going through it a lot of time, just thinking, like, why are they doing it to me? Why ain't they doing it to someone else who would fight them? But that's what it was, because my will wasn't there to fight. Or the fear was, I allowed the fear to take over me. And which is actually what people do now.